Okay, so in this video, we're basically going to modify the picture here. I'm going to create a brand new image that I'm going to use as a texture file for my model. Now, my model is pretty much the same on all the sides, except for the top and the bottom. And I can pretty much use what we have here. There are some tricks when it comes to texturing if you are wanting to get into, say, video game development, and if you're wanting to really try to reduce file size and different things. One thing about this model is I could do some weird stuff with it to make it even smaller and more efficient. For this video, I'm not going to try to make it too overly convoluted or funky or anything. The one thing that's kind of odd that you might be seeing here is I'm actually using the web version of Photoshop, and that is because I am updating the version of Photoshop on my computer. So it might look a little bit different than you're kind of used to. In fact, I'm not really even used to this one. So, I'll be kind of learning a little bit too, right? But I used this one here, and I think I'm going to keep using it as my main source. And I am going to copy it and paste it. So it's on a new layer all by itself. And, oh, sorry, keyboard shortcuts do not work as same, I guess. All right, so let's select it again. And I'm going to need to transform this thing. I'll just do free transform. So I'm so used to doing the keyboard shortcuts. Again, I am not as familiar with this version of Photoshop. Now I will say I am significantly changing the size of this object, and so it may start to lose some resolution. You can see it's a little bit grainy or whatever. If I save it as a smaller file, it might look a little better, or I might need to run this through like an AI upscaler or something to make it look better, kind of after the fact. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's just switch to a different tool, and let's go ahead and hit deselect. Again, I'm so used to using the other version. All right, so here it pretty much is. Now, there are some things that again, the biggest problem with this was done with AI, and so it's not bad, right? I mean, it's a pretty good piece of artwork, but again, one of the biggest criticisms, problems, or issues with AI generated art right now, and again, this is likely something that will be definitely fixed in the future, is that it does weird things, like this side doesn't really match this side. Whatever this little fancy deal is here, and this fancy deal, and this fancy deal, and this fancy deal, they're all different. That's really bizarre. Like, real life things aren't made that way. The width of this object is different here, and different here, and different here. The lighting is consistent, which is really nice. Again, AI does a pretty good job with things like that, but there are little visual inconsistencies that basically kind of scream, are just head scratching, right? Like, why does it do that? Other things that would make our job a little bit easier later are getting rid of kind of these edging places. So one kind of easy first kind of step is we're going to go through and just use like clone stamp, and yes, I know how to use clone stamp. I'm going to clone over the edge. Now you can see here that's not such a good job, but my clone stamp brush size is a little big. A little small. All right, so basically I'm going to do it. Now you can see, am I phoning it in, doing kind of a less than wonderful job? Yeah. Maybe too bad, but because I'm kind of losing this edge here, which I don't know if I want to lose. I like it. Again, this web version is a little bit, harder to use if my Photoshop gets done. All right, so I'm just basically going to kind of fix the edging and bring it over is really what I want to do. There are other ways we could do this. If you've had some of the Photoshop class and different things, you could grab I could grab like the edge here and maybe just copy it, paste it. Oh, sorry, Control T opens a new tab. It's not using the free transform I'm so used to. Let's pull this over. So that looks pretty good. Done. Drop this here. So there, yeah, that's what should have done that to begin with, right? That's much better, and I can use maybe the spot healing brush to kind of come back and fix this edge. Kind of a really nice retouching tool. Now that I have this background here, it usually does a pretty good job. If it's not working right, my brush might be set a little big, or I might need to use clone stamp for things like trying to keep the straight edge, which I kind of messed up here. And again, the desktop version, you can see the preview, so it's a little less guesswork. You know, I'm going to say I'm okay with it being not 100% perfect because this isn't 100% perfect, right? Maybe I'm going for, you know, I want it a little bit rough. I will say things like this dark edge I might want to get rid of, even though it looked okay, because it's too noticeable. So, you know, if you're doing a game texture or something, you know, having something that's super stand out like that isn't ideal, because you can see it. All right. So you can see here, I'm just kind of, again, these tools are at such strange places, what I'm used to. I'm gonna go ahead and pause the video because I don't want this to take 1,000 years, but I'm gonna go ahead and move this up here because I messed this one up, and then we'll just use the blend tools and stuff. So I'm gonna fix this texture and then we'll bring it back over to Max. Okay, well, I can tell you this, if people are using the web version of Photoshop, I can see why Canva is taking so much of their market share. But you can see here, I've made some edits to this thing quite a bit. What I did was I took the left side and I copied it and I flipped it to the right side. I erased pieces of it. I expanded out a lot of it and basically removed a lot of the problematic parts that might cause me trouble when I bring it over into Max. You can see I tried to still keep some of the unique elements that were there. One thing about game textures and hand painted textures in general is they do tend to have those imperfections. It's ironic that one of the things that people keep picking out when it comes to AI artwork are all of these inconsistencies and problems, which are the biggest issues with AI artwork, but also those are the elements that kind of used to tell people it was a human thing, right? So I don't want to lose all the imperfections. I don't want the left side to look exactly like the right side. I don't want them to be identical, but I want them to be symmetrical in design. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. We're going to apply it to our model now over inside of 3ds Max. Okay, here we are back inside of 3ds Max. I'm just going to hit M to bring open my material editor. Let's try it again. And here you can see the texture I had done previously for the planes. I'm going to go to a new one here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. I'm going to click this little button right here, which is a shortcut for the color of the object. If I were to change this thing, you can see it would change the, where my mouse disappeared to, it would change the texture to something. But if I were to click this little box, here I can add a bitmap. Remember, bitmap is just the generic name for something that exists outside the program. For those of you that are familiar with bitmap as a file type, it might seem a weird name. It is a weird name. But also this program was originally, I think, first version 1 was like 1988. So a lot of things have changed since then. That term is just the one that's been in here. So here's the box texture I just created in Photoshop. I'm going to hit open. And it's going to load in here. I'm not going to need to change any of these settings. I'm just going to go back up to my material settings, and I'm going to click the Apply Material to Selection button. And then in case it's not showing up, I can make sure this one's selected, but you can see it went ahead and put it on already. If I turn it off, it'll disappear. On, it'll bring it back. Now, I'm going to come over here, and we're just going to basically hide my planes because it's too, I don't want to like, I don't want to get mixed up. So I'm going to click hide selection. So I just have my box here. Now you can see, first of all, it does not quite work out perfect. There are definitely some issues happening because my mapping doesn't match my new picture. It matches the picture, the little part of the other image, not this image. And so it looks funky. So I'm going to need to fix my mapping. Now this is a bit advanced. So if, again, if you want to stop here, go ahead. If you want to keep going, we'll keep going. But I'm going to go ahead and change my mapping. So what mapping is basically how the texture wraps around the object. So if I add my UVW map modifier, and then I'm just going to pick box or face, either way should be, or planar should be the same. You can see there it is. Doesn't look a whole lot different, right? But now it's applying the same thing universally, and I'm going to go ahead and add my unwrap modifier in order to fix it, and hopefully it'll match up once we've edited. We won't know for sure until we get in there and play, right? So, again, we can see that's not bad, that's kind of terrible. All right, let's play with it a little bit and see how we can get this thing to look. All right, so this part can be a little bit confusing. Well, it didn't. It looks like, okay, it looks like it's having some issues. I had something selected at the sub-object level. So let's try this again. Make sure that this isn't, one of these aren't selected, that this is selected, so the whole object. Now I'm going to go and just redo that process. So I'm going to do UV map, UVW map. There we go. See how it's changing. I'm going to do box, already looking a lot better. Pretty good. Again, and I'm going to do unwrap now and open. You can see the green lines. That's what I want to see. Now, here you can see how these lines don't quite line up perfectly. That's because when I modeled this, my one side and the other side aren't exactly the same. So that's not ideal. We're going to need to basically kind of move a few things around. So let's move these over. This is the top and the bottom of my object, and now I'm mostly left with just the sides. Definitely looks like we have some other things happening here. So I don't want to spend too much time on all of this, but essentially I kind of want these things all to line up. So it looks like they're offset just a little. Again, this is my fault for when I modeled it. I didn't make them, perfectly symmetrical. So, that's on me a little bit. Hey, even though I've been doing this a long time, sometimes it's hard to remember all of the steps while you're putting it together, right? You're just kind of modeling and making the thing and, having fun and trying to remember everything that's going to happen 7 steps later. It can be tough. Let's make sure we turn on our texture and see what we got. So here, I fixed this. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we do want to try to get it as close as we can. Now, this picture is off-centered a little bit, so I'm going to have to keep that in mind, And so basically, I'm going to edit these to match up a little better. All right, I was kind of messing with this, and I just wasn't liking how it was looking. So I actually decided to delete my modifiers and kind of start over. I'm going to go straight to unwrap. The box itself should have, should have a pretty good mapping that's going to match what I want. When I added the box modifier, it had a lot of problems with these beveled edges. So instead of making a new map, I'm just going to work off of the original map, which is this. What's going to be the biggest problem here is the beveled edges are getting stretched out and kind of funky. The alignment's still not right. So I still have some things to kind of work on. But overall, the original map without any changes is actually a lot more akin to what I want, if I'm honest. So, again, I've been doing this for a long time, but still every model's different. Every model's unique. What you want from every model is a little bit different. So, trial and error is part of the process. Now, I do think that probably in a few years there will be some more advanced tools that will use AI and different algorithms to probably making texturing and this stuff easier, simpler, and more efficient. But I mean, there's something kind of nice about kind of doing it by hand as well. Here don't want to mess up those edges, so it's going to be a bit tricky to get this just right. Honestly, this is the first thing I did really in 3D as an artist was mapping and texturing. So I find this process kind of fun. Not everybody does, but you can see here these should kind of probably all line up. So I'm going to grab that one and that one. That must be the top and bottom. All right, I'm going to put them there, and then so that one might be this one might be a little trickier to get right. All right, but basically what you're going to do is move these around till you're happy with how it looks. All right, here you can see kind of one that I've been fiddling with for a while, probably longer than I should have, since this video, the recorded part is only 16 minutes, but I've been fiddling with it a while. So you can see there's a few issues. I wanted to show you the issues on purpose because this model could be done and ready to go, or it might need a little bit more work. But if we wanted to do more work from here on out, we actually would need to take this back into Photoshop and try to change the actual image to look more like this map. So this shape in the middle is essentially this part of my model, right? I've kind of made it this shape because I wanted it to match as close as possible. But notice the highlighting edges along this shape. Sorry, it keeps flashing. Right here, for example. They do not match this geometry. If I were to go into Photoshop and actually paint the line to match perfectly, this would look really good inside 3D because the texture would match the model perfectly. This texture was generated in a generator, and while I tried to make it as close as I could and make it match, and that's why it's kind of a little bit wonky shape through here. Again, if I knew I was going to take this into Photoshop, I would pull this over and move these points around a little bit to make them look a little nicer, because the truth is it's a weird shape. I would want it to be a nicer shape. Even that actually might have made the texture look a little bit better on the model. So there is a little bit of trial and error in regards to how it's supposed to look. But if this is how it looked inside of my map, and I went into Photoshop and I made these highlights and edges match perfectly and the shadows match perfectly, I brought it over here, it would look really good. It wouldn't have these kind of weird wobbly edges where the texture just doesn't line up. Like, again, here's the curve, but here's the edge. The only way to fix that would be inside of Photoshop and make it look better. The truth is, the rest of the box didn't turn out that bad. Like, if we close this guy down, maybe if we turn off edged faces, you can see, again, the middle part, I'm not in love with. It looks all weird and funky, but again, that's because the model and the texture don't match up just right. If I were, again, take it in Photoshop, fix it to match perfect, it's going to look fantastic. Again, for this class, we're trying to just get the hang of things. Also, I will tell you this, if I didn't model this piece popping out, if I would have left it flat, it'd look perfect. So part of this is my fault because I bumped it out. I wanted it to look a little bit more three-dimensional. I created that geometry. That geometry doesn't match the picture, which was generated as a flat image, and it doesn't look right. If I were to flatten that geometry completely, it'd look a lot better, right? I wouldn't have all of this geometry fighting for the texture mapping space. So in part, because I made the model more complex, my texture doesn't look as good. If I would have left it flat, I'm tempted to go back and flatten it and then fix the map so you can see it would look really good. If I wouldn't have bumped it out, it wouldn't look so wiggly, but I did bump it out. You know, but what do I want from it? If I wanted to not look flat from the side, that's what I got to do, right? I got to add some geometry. So if I want the geometry, I need to edit the texture to match the geometry. If I didn't care about the geometry and left it flat, again, maybe this ornate object doesn't bump out that far, I could do that. Now, if you're still watching this video after 20 minutes, I'll leave you with one more thing, especially if you're interested in doing art for video games and for cinema and stuff. I could have left that flat and created a nice normal map, and then the lighting would still look like it had depth. Fine depth, not extreme depth. So if I really wanted, again, this to have, from the side to look like it has, you know, geometry, I would need to bump it out like this. But if I didn't care about that silhouette, and I just wanted it to look like, again, it was three-dimensional and realistic up close, I could have left it flat and add a normal map. I would want to do a normal map anyway, even with the geometry. So that way, again, the lighting bounced off properly. But I know that's a little advanced. We're only on week 2 if you're watching this video. I'm talking about stuff next week. But, you know, there's a lot to take in here. You know, keep in mind, this takes a while. This takes practice. This takes a while, you know, a while to put together. I've been doing this forever, and I've still been working on it for, you know, an hour. So it can be fun. I've enjoyed myself for the hour, but it can take a while. All right. Thanks for watching. And if you got to the end, I really appreciate you putting all the time into this video. And I hope you got something out of it.